We thought that the last conversation had already happened. We thought it was the Great Commission, 11 disciples on a mountain in Galilee, Jesus speaking with the full authority of heaven and earth, sending them out to the ends of the world. That feels like an ending, like the kind of moment that you close a book on. But then John adds one more scene. A conversation on a beach, a charcoal fire, some fish, the smell of breakfast in the morning air. And what follows is the last recorded conversation Jesus has with anyone in the four Gospels. Just Jesus, the fire, and a question asked 3 times, "Do you love me?" It turns out that the last conversation is the most personal one. So let's imagine the word of the Lord together from John 21. They didn't know what to do with themselves. The risen Jesus had appeared to them twice. He had breathed on them, shown him his hands and his side, given them the Holy Spirit, and sent them out. And still, here they were, back in Galilee, standing on the edge of a lake, looking at a boat. Peter broke the silence first. "I'm going fishing." Maybe it was restlessness. Maybe it was grief that needed somewhere to go. And maybe after everything that had happened, the upper room, the garden, the cross, the empty tomb, he just needed something that he knew how to do. Something that made sense, something with ropes and nets and water, the rhythms of a life he had lived before a man had ever called him away from it. 6 others said, "We'll come too." So they went out. They fished all night and they caught nothing. Which is a little crazy because these are not novice fishermen. This was their water, their craft, their livelihood. And after a long night of working, they had nothing to show for it. Just empty nets, tired arms, the first gray light of morning beginning to show on the horizon. And then they heard a voice from the shore, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" They hadn't recognized him yet. Perhaps the distance was too great or the light was still too low. But whatever the reason, they don't know who it was. "No," they called back. "Throw your net on the right side of the boat. You will find some there." Now, this was not the first time this had happened. The very first time Jesus encountered Peter, he had told him the same thing. After a fruitless night of fishing, throw the nets on the other side. The catch had been so large it nearly sank 2 boats. And here they were again, same instruction, same result. The net filled so fast they couldn't haul it in. John was the first one to understand. He turned to Peter and said quietly, simply, "It is the Lord." As soon as he heard John, Peter didn't hesitate. He jumped over the side of the boat into the water. The others followed in the boat, dragging the net behind them. They were only 100 yards from shore, but Peter was not waiting. And when they got to the shore, they found a fire already burning, fish on it, some bread beside it. Jesus had not needed their catch. He already had food waiting. But he said, "Bring some of the fish you've just caught." And Peter went back and helped drag the net onto the beach. 153 large fish, John tells us for some reason, but the net did not tear. And then Jesus said, "Come, have breakfast." And nobody asked who he was. They all knew maybe they just didn't quite know what to say. So they sat down, and Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them. And he took the fish and he gave it to them, just like he'd done before on a hillside with thousands of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And just like he had done in the upper room the night before he died with bread and wine. Jesus fed them first. Before any conversation happens, before any questions are asked or answered, before any restoration or recommission or sending out, Jesus feeds them breakfast. He tends to the ordinary physical human need of a group of cold, tired, hungry fishermen who have been up all night long. Jesus arrives with a warm meal, the risen Lord of heaven and earth in one of his last acts before leaving this world, crouched over a fire on the beach, cooking fish, present, unhurried, taking care of the people he loved in the most ordinary way possible. They ate together in the quiet of the morning, the sun coming up over the water. No one saying much, just the sound of a crackling fire and the smell of cooking fish and the lake and the weight of being in the presence of someone you love. And when breakfast was finished, Jesus turned to Peter. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Jesus used his old name, not Peter, the name Jesus had given him, the name that meant rock. Simon, the name he had before any of this started. And the question landed with a weight that everyone sitting there would have felt, even if it was only the 2 of them speaking. Do you love me more than these? More than the other disciples? More than the nets and the boats and the fish and the life that he had just spent the night returning to? We don't know exactly what Jesus meant, but Peter knew what the question was really about. He had said loudly and confidently not so long ago, even if everyone else falls away, I never will. He had not kept that promise. Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs. A second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Tend my sheep. And then a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Now, Peter was hurt by the third question. Of course he was, because by the third time, the math is unavoidable. 1 question for every denial, 1 moment of do you love me for every moment of I don't know him. Jesus was not being cruel. He was going back to the exact place where Peter had broken, and he was meeting Peter there. Lord, Peter said, you know all things. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep. 3 denials, 3 questions. 3 times Jesus put something back in Peter's hands, a purpose. The same calling Jesus had given him at the very beginning, returning to him now on the other side of his worst failure. And then Jesus said something that shifted their conversation. When you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus was indicating the kind of death that Peter would eventually die. He was telling Peter directly, this road leads to a cross. And then he said the same two words he had said on another shore beside another boat on the first day they met. Follow me. The call hadn't changed, the destination hadn't changed, and the cost hadn't changed. But the man had. Peter had now seen what following Jesus all the way would look like. He had followed him to a garden, to a courtyard, to the edge of a cross, and he had broken. And Jesus had come back for him anyway, and now he was asking again, follow me. Not because Peter had proven himself, not because he had earned another chance, but because this is what Jesus does. He comes back. He builds a fire. He asks the questions that need to be asked. And then he calls you again. Follow me. I love that the last conversation Jesus has in the four Gospels is not with a crowd. It's not on a mountain. It's not marked by earthquakes or angels or the full authority of heaven and earth being declared. It is breakfast on a beach with tired people who went back to what they knew, and a question asked 3 times to a man who had failed in the most painful way he could imagine. And Jesus met him there, exactly there. The whole point of these last 2 months has been listening to these conversations with Jesus so that we might be transformed. Hearing Jesus' words for ourselves and asking Jesus' questions in our own lives that we might look more like Jesus in our own lives. So I invite you to ask yourself the same questions that Jesus asks Peter. Where have you gone back to the familiar because the weight of following felt too heavy? It's probably not fishing. Maybe it's a habit, a numbness, a way of filling the hours with something that keeps your hands busy and your heart quiet. What is the thing you go back to when you don't know what else to do? And what denial are you carrying? Not necessarily anything dramatic, maybe just the slow, quiet accumulation of moments when you knew what following would cost and you chose the easier thing instead. Jesus doesn't ask us to list them. He just asks one question, and he asks it until it reaches the place that the hurt is. Do you love me? Maybe you've been sitting with that question longer than you realize. Maybe it's been underneath all of it. The busyness, the doubt, the going back to the familiar. Because the question is not, do you have your theology right? Or do you have your life together? Or do you show up enough? Just this, just the most basic, most personal question that exists within a relationship. Do you love me? And that can be really hard to answer if we're being honest. We live in a world that measures love by productivity, by output, by what you have done lately and what you're planning to do next. And somewhere along the way, many of us have started relating to God in the same way. We measure our love for God by our attendance, our service, our performance, our consistency. And when those things falter, as they always do, we assume the answer to the question might be no, or at least not enough. But that is not what Jesus is asking. He's not asking Peter to produce a record of faithful service. He's not even asking him to account for his denial or explain himself or demonstrate that he has changed. He is asking something so much simpler and so much harder than any of that. Do you love me? Not do you love what I can do for you? Not do you love the version of me that heals and multiplies loaves and raises the dead? Not do you love the movement, the community, the identity that comes from following me? Me. Do you love me? Some of us have spent years serving the church and have slowly, quietly lost the thread back to that question. The meetings and programs and responsibilities pile up, and somewhere underneath all of it, the personal, living relationship with Jesus got buried. You're still showing up, but if you're honest, you can't remember the last time you sat with Jesus long enough to hear him ask you anything. And some of us have walked away from church or even faith itself at times because someone who claimed to speak for Jesus hurt you. And the wound went so deep that the question, do you love me, stopped feeling like an invitation and started feeling like a demand from someone who was already taking too much. And if that is where you are, I want you to know that Jesus is not asking this question from a place of entitlement. He's asking from a beach with breakfast already made, having done the only thing that needed to be done. He's not asking because he needs an answer. He's asking because you need to say it. And some of us are just tired. You followed Jesus into something costly, a marriage, a calling, a sacrifice, a season of faithfulness that no one saw. And it didn't turn out the way you hoped. And now you're in a boat in the dark with empty nets going through the motions, not sure you have much left. And Jesus meets you there too. And if the answer is yes, Lord, I love you, even a tired yes, even an uncertain yes, even a yes being spoken by someone sitting at beach at dawn with empty nets and a night of failure behind you, then Jesus has something to put back into your hands, a purpose. Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. Feed my lambs looks like a conversation you have with the person at work who is quietly falling apart and doesn't know who to talk to. Tend my sheep looks like showing up again for the person in your life who keeps needing more than it feels fair to give. Feed my sheep looks like using whatever you have, your story, your home, your time, your presence, your resources, in the service of someone who is hungry in any way. It looks like the small and ordinary and mostly unwitnessed acts of a person who has been restored and now knows what to do with their life. That calling that you thought you had forfeited, the purpose you thought maybe you had walked away from, the thing God made you for before you knew how much it would cost. Jesus is giving it back. This is what restoration looks like in the hands of Jesus, not erasure or pretending it didn't happen, but return to the fire, to the question, to the calling, and the quiet insistence that failure is not the final word. And then Jesus says the same thing he has always said, the thing he will keep saying, the thing that turns out to be both the beginning and the end of the conversation that he has with everyone he loves. Follow me. This week, may you find that Jesus is already there and breakfast is ready. May you know that your tired yes is more than enough. And may you have the courage to follow. Amen.